Sure, this is close enough for me to grab. Apparently, that was a pretty good sneeze. I already took my antihistamine. Hey everybody, how you doing? We're here. We're ready. Oh, that's right. Forgot to take that into the pop-out. Gives me at least a little more control. Whoops. Hi Dan, how you doing? Nice for you to join us. We've had quite the week. It has been rather eventful.
Busy, at least.
Yes, Samantha says, hello, hello. Hi, Samantha. I don't think I've seen your name before, unless you're changing your name on us, which happens. But welcome anyway. How are you all doing? Something's not working on Ian's computer. Emerald Dawn says, hello, everyone. Hi, Emerald. Welcome. How are you all doing this week? Ruth says, hi, all. Hi, Ruth. Some familiar names and a new one here and there.
Yep, for new people, please feel free to ask any magically related questions
you might have on your mind.
Just want to talk about.
You betcha. Brenda says, hi there, I made it. I was here an hour ago. Well, at least you were early. I mean, so that's awesome. Instead of getting the time in the other direction, then you'd be going like, I'm an hour late. So congratulations. Welcome. Glad you made it. Life is like that some days. It just gets. Willow Moon says hi. Hi, Willow. How are you? More people are joining us. I can see the number going up.
I know. Somebody has a subject they want to talk about.
I'm sure there must be a question out there. Cody Unicorn says, hi, y'all. First time watching your live. Well, welcome to our live show. It is all about what you guys want to talk about and what questions that you have that are burning a hole in your brain. Athusa says, hi, Siofra, Ian, and all. Hi, Athusa. Is that a frog? My eyes aren't so great.
Yeah, I can't really decipher.
Okay, Samantha Blackbird says, it's said that when your conscience is speaking to you in your head, it can actually be your past loved ones or how you communicate with the dead. Well, yeah, or it could be your higher self or a spirit that's wandering by that wants to say hi. I mean, there is a lot of things that can happen in your head.
Generally, once a person has had enough experience, they learn to recognize the voices that are in their head, start recognizing them as external voices for the ones that are
actually external.
They sound like they're internal to start with. That's how everybody starts out hearing them.
Kendra says, hi there, Siofra and Ian. Hi, Kendra. But yeah, I mean, communication that way, it's an interesting process because in the beginning, you're not sure, what is that voice in my head? You know, is it just my unconscious that's speaking or something outside of me? And part of the answer comes in whether or not that voice knows something you don't. That helps to externalize it and give you sort of more confidence. Part of it's intuition. Sometimes it's your own internal dialogue that's trying to tell you something needs to happen or something is wrong or you need to be somewhere because something great will happen, you know. So it's complicated.
Yep.
It's not a super straightforward kind of thing.
Yeah, everybody has to kind of practice.
Erin says, hello. Hi, Erin. Samantha says, how do you actually speak with the dead? I've been practicing since my own near-death experience. I'm very anxious to learn. Well, I do paranormal investigations and I speak with past human spirits that are stuck. Um, I don't strictly just call up any dead person to have a chat. So I use empathy is my mode for speaking with them because I can feel the feelings that they're having and I can communicate that way and I verbalize the feelings and figure out what's going on. People have actually watched me do it. Some of them, like my granddaughter, could actually hear what the dead person was saying. And then my dialogue with them fit what they could hear. Everyone's got different skill sets, so not everyone's going to hear an external voice. So it's going to really depend upon your own abilities and inclinations and so forth and what your strengths are. Ida Mama says, hi, Shifa and Ian. Hope you're having a blessed day. At the moment we're recovering from driving for 7 hours yesterday to deliver my Celtic tree piece to the state fair. And oh my, we were gone for like 12 hours all together. It was quite an arduous trip and exhausting. I'm feeling more normal now that we've had lunch. I've had a little bit of time to like just sort of calm down and take stock and just sort of veg. This morning it was like, I cannot move. I am a dead rock. That's it. I'm just going to sit here like a lump. Moonfire Dawn says, hello, this week went fast. Talk more about Barden and his live magic. I'm amazed he performed openly.
Yeah. Most of my information comes from the book Verbato, which Barden had outlined before he died, but basically it's about 98% true. And so he tells the different stories in there of uh, he mentions a little bit about the live practice of magic. He mentions some other things about a Black Lodge that he came into contact with and some battles with them he had and some other stuff that are basically true stories, though it's listed as a work of fiction. Barden couldn't finish it because he died, so it was finished by his secretary. So, but most of it's true, and if you look at some of the stuff, a lot of this comes out of the Czechoslovakia area and thereabouts, but you can find information, and there have been several books published about him by his followers and his students. One Dr. M.K., his son, Lumir Barden, who was also a doctor, and you can find out more about that stuff from descriptions of what he really did. But yeah, he did real magic on stage.
One I remember is when he made a plant grow. Wasn't there one where he grew a plant on stage?
Well, I don't know. But he talks about how to do that.
It's been a while since I read the book.
Yeah, and points out that a lot of people in India fake that.
Mm. So Willow Moon says, what do you do to help connect with the energies of the land? Spend time on the land, sitting on the ground, trying to tune into weather patterns, the seasons, if they have them, depending on where you are on the planet.
Yeah, just don't be distracted by everyday things and what you got to do at work and things like that, and open to them.
Okay, so Kendra says, I'm on my other account, but I had told that I made an air wand, but put a grounding hematite. So it's actually an astral wand, and I switched the hematite with a peach moonstone. Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yep.
Seems more meshing.
Yep.
Talon says, sorry I missed the beginning. Well, it's only been a few minutes, so you haven't missed too much. Welcome. Violet says,
Violet.
hi. Hi, Violet. The Beezer says, hi, Shifa, Ian in chat. Welcome to Beezer. Talon says, I told someone that I considered to be my best friend for 15 years that I no longer want to have anything to do with him.
Yeah, that's tough.
Setting boundaries. Yeah, it can be difficult, but rewarding.
Yeah. I had to do that, not recently, but yeah, I started becoming a better person, and I started realizing that a lot of the people I carried or hung around with and thought were my friends are really not very nice people. So yeah, I kind of faced similar things years back.
Sophia says hello. Hi, Sophia. Eve says, hello there. Hi. Hi, Eve. Willow Moon says, I actually ask myself a question, which is a definite yes. Then I remember that yes feeling when I'm speaking with spirits. That sounds like a good method to help identify the correct feeling. Eve says, just hopped on. Well, good.
And
good thing to hop on to.
And I'm going to add a little bit to that, to what Willow Moon said. The yes feeling of talking about spirits. Oh, I'm sorry, brain cramp. I'll have to finish it later. I'll
Okay,
get back
brain
to you
cramp.
on that one.
On we go. Brenda says, been doing a lot of reading in the Big Blue Book and Book of Spirit Communication. Love them. Had extra time today, so I watched your video on she's talking about astral temples. That idea is interesting to me. We'll meditate on that this evening. It can certainly be a very interesting experiment, especially since it changes as you change. And so revisiting it periodically, you can actually see differences in your inner landscape as far as, what has might moved around or what has appeared and so forth. So it can be very interesting. Eve says, I heard that about the old friends, Ian. Alex Jane says, hello, loves. So glad I caught you. I'm going to be listening to you guys in the shower for a bit. I need to do a nice cleansing session. Well, have a nice time cleaning away. Eve says, same story as far as finding out that her friends were not as nice as you was hoping that they were. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of everyone who actually starts to grow. I mean, if you start to evolve and develop, you outgrow the people that you're around.
Yes, and your environment changes to reflect your own growth. That's just natural.
Otherwise, you'd never be able to move past wherever you are. I mean, and that's the problem some people have. They have a hard time letting go of the past and the past associations and connections. It becomes extremely complicated when it has to do with family members. That actually puts another layer of
right.
Yeah.
And
on the whole picture.
Yeah.
But it's inevitable if you're actually going to evolve as a human being, if you're going to grow and become who you are. Chances are there's not going to be that many people that are around you that are going to go for the ride, because you changing will make them feel uncomfortable, because then that sort of brings up their own unresolved issues, and then all kinds of weird stuff can happen from that, accusations and who knows what else. But yeah, it's
I actually wanted to go back because I don't think this is something we ever talked about too much. Back to Willow Moon's thing. Not that it's directly related, but I have noticed some people, you have to be careful. The way it works is the beings have to talk to you within your own frame of reference when they're talking to you, so they will use words and things that you will understand properly. But I have read a number of books written by some people who have channeled beings, and some of those books were very molded by the personality and outlooks of the author. One in particular, which I don't remember the name of, it was a female channel, and it was clear that the being she was talking to was trying to tell her something legitimate and genuine, but she had so much Christianity stuffed in her head she couldn't hear it. She had to put it all in a Christian context. So, you have to watch out not to, when you're listening to beings and trying to decide whether they're within your head or what have you, you have to watch out that you don't put your own context on it, because speaking with beings like that is very tentative at the beginning, and it's easy to poke your own interpretation on things, which it might not be what's meant. Since I don't think we've talked about that specifically.
Well, we've talked about a little bit, like with shadow work, being able to figure out what your own prejudices are and so forth, which is one of the reasons for doing that, is because, you can't actually have a clear communication if you are projecting onto whatever it
so
happens to be.
that doesn't relate specifically to anything anybody has said here. I just, yeah, came to mind.
So Samantha says, just wanted to take the time to thank you for your videos that I've watched in the past that helped me with blocking mirrors, windows in my home, and mental health, spiritual videos that have helped me. Well, I'm glad.
Thank you. We're glad. Glad.
Yeah, I'm glad that something that we're doing can help other people. It's always encouraging when we hear that, because, you know, it's just the way we are. Violet says, when Ian's brain cramps, it actually makes me feel not so crazy because mine cramps in person too. It's nice of you to put yourself out there and helps me. Maybe brain cramp is a sign of genius. Maybe. Talon says, I've almost got the walk-in terrarium ready to start sculpting the back walls. The bottom is not going to crack or leak. Well, good. You don't want to have too many cracks or leaks in your walk-in terrarium. Walk-in terrarium. Willow Moon says, I'm intrigued. I do wonder how you can tell what is connecting and what is just imagination when speaking with spirits. Yeah, and that's practice. I mean, it's the only thing that really teaches you that is practice and staying open and having a healthy sense of skepticism and not accepting wholesale whatever another being that you think is talking to you might say, because they can have their own agendas. You know, it's just because they're spirit doesn't mean that they're pure,
right?
And have nothing in mind. And sometimes it seems like it's a test to see if you can figure it out. I don't know, but
yeah, I haven't.
I
haven't had much experience of really running into obnoxious spirits. The only thing I really run into is obnoxious thought forms from other people.
So Violet laughs. Eve says, I had been having strange dreams about being in a Costco-like store, and everyone was not nice to me, although I was very pleasant. It was quite disappointing, but then I figured out upon waking that this was the layout of my subconscious. Oh my God, you just said wholesale. I think we passed the test. Well, you know, it's an exercise in, I don't know what. I mean, it's an experiment in a sense. There's no hard, fast manual to follow because we're so individual and we have so many different facets to our lives and our past lives and our spiritual lives and our abilities, the bodies we happen to be in, the family we're born into, and so forth. And a lot of times, like a lot of the books, they use a lot of euphemisms or broad terminology that seems lame because it's like, well, that's not helpful at all. But interestingly enough, once you really start to evolve inside of yourself, then they have more meaning. And it's like trying to translate some of this information from a different realm or a different place altogether to make it understandable here is difficult. And so a lot of times it comes off as this euphemism or whatever. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole. It's amazing we can communicate with each other at all.
That's true.
It's like a big mire trying to wade your way through.
So the Beezer says, this happened one night at a house I used to live at. I was on the porch and I started levitating. Oh, wait a minute. I missed the astral projection one. Let me go back. Sophia says, can you give us a mini lesson to succeed in astral projecting? It's not working for me. I'm always knocking out to sleep. Try doing it during the day.
Yeah,
Set a timer.
well, and the other thing is, yes, set a timer, do it when you're awake. I would recommend doing it sitting up. So that can help you. And also one of the means that many of the mystics and things use to help with issues like that, they make sure if they don't make a habit of falling asleep at that time of day. In other words, you know, you want to do it at the same time, but you want to stay awake. Where was I going with that?
How to not to fall asleep when you're trying to astral project.
Yes. One of the major things they do is some form of an asana, which the easiest one is just sitting in a chair like Barden recommends. but you put enough tension on your body that it kind of keeps you awake without being enough tension to make you uncomfortable. So you might sit up in a chair straight with your legs, and one of the things Barton recommends is your knees together. So that puts just a little bit of tension on your legs, holding your knees together and your arms, hands flat on your thighs, and sit up straight, and don't rest your back on the chair, though. I'd say take your time on that, get a little bit at a time, because it can be straining to the body if you're not used to just holding your knees together and things like that. But those little bits of tension will really help keep you awake and aware. So you might try meditating or trying to astral travel in your case in something like an asana position of some sort.
And practice.
Yeah.
The Beezer says, this happened one night at a house I used to live at. I was on the porch and I started levitating. I knew how to push against the ground. Leaves started swirling around me. Then I started getting visited by shadow people at my bed and in the yard for a year or so. Sounds like a fascinating experience. Jacqueline says, agree, spirit don't have to tell the truth. Yeah, that's true. It's a misnomer that the spirit always has to tell the truth and it doesn't have a choice. Eve laughs. The Beezer says, I moved to a new house and still got visited, but eventually it stopped, thankfully. Yeah, sometimes the shadow people are very uncomfortable to be around. Eve says, I've been doing quite a bit of shadow work recently and learned things that I probably already knew but didn't recognize in myself. I always fall to sleep when doing shadow work during the day, and if the day, interestingly, oh, that didn't come out correctly. That's silly old talk to text, okay? Willow Moon says, could you tell me a little more about thought forms? Okay, so thought forms is just a reality of the mostly unseen universe. Whenever you have a thought, you're creating a thought form that's visible in the astral or mental plane. And most of the time, thank goodness, otherwise we would all be screaming down the street and tearing our hair out. Most people don't see them. I've seen them. I see them on occasion. Fortunately, not all the time. I tend to block most thought forms because unless it's something I really need to know. But I think that this is how telepathy really happens, that is part of the mechanism of telepathy. And the longer you're with someone, the easier it is for telepathic communication to happen because you're used to their particular thoughts, the way they feel and so forth. And my granddaughter and I do it, Ian and I do it. I mean, in our household, it's just sort of a natural occurrence.
I think it happens more than people know, and they get a feeling or something, or tend to think about a certain person at a certain time that person is thinking about them. So I think there's a lot of it that happens unrecognized.
Right, and usually what it is the person's thinking about them and sending the thought form to you. And if you're sensitive, you've picked up the thought form, and then you start thinking about them, and then they contact you, and so the connection is made. Sometimes thought forms are highly unpleasant if people have very negative personalities and are tending to think very negative things about you.
One of the things I've found in the past is you can mistakenly think the thought forms are your own if you're not really clear. You can think it's your thought form coming up, but it's somebody else's thought form that went to you, or a thought form about you. If somebody thinks about you and really visualizes you being angry, you might potentially become angry if you don't have good shields and stuff.
This is true.
A lot of it happens accidentally, but communication.
So Night Wandering Daughter says, hello everyone, hope all is well with everyone entering the session late, but I'll catch up. Eve says, hello Night Wanderer. Sophia says, thank you. Can you recommend a meditation besides the sacred tree? Well, there's a lot of different kinds of meditation that you can do. Just awareness, like being in the moment kind of thing, meditation. Mindfulness is what they like to call it nowadays. But the idea is to be present in your body, in your environment, in your task, and what you're doing, and not having your mind wander. learning how not to let your mind wander off
Yeah.
into pointless places is one of the
Yeah,
goals
one
of
of the
meditation.
best things you can do is the breathing, and just be aware of your breathing. Breathe in and out, and then eventually that can be turned into a pranayama where you do like a fourfold breath. You breathe in, you hold it for a certain amount of time, you breathe out, you hold it for a certain amount of time. That's a whole other thing and a more complicated process, but just watching your breath and not be thinking, just being there. You're breathing in, you're breathing out, and ideally you just become the breathing. There's nothing else that registers in you in your mind. You just become the breathing. You are breathing in, breathing out. And that's the ideal if you can keep your mind clear enough.
And other kinds of meditation is like focusing on an object, an external object to yourself, and trying to become the object and sort of be with the object, whether it's a candle flame or an apple or a stone or whatever, which builds concentration and visualization abilities and that kind of thing.
Also tends to increase your connection to the akasha and intuition by
Yep.
doing it that way.
Yeah, because if you can feel yourself becoming something other than you, it really broadens your perspective on what is consciousness.
Well, and then there are mystical states like samadhi, which is when you have joined in union with something, you understand it completely from the inside by being it. So these things can all get taken to extremely interesting levels.
So Night Wandering Daughter says, "Hello, Eve Wolf." And Eve says, "You're good. I myself am not the best word speller." Lewell says, "Hi, can't stay long, just wanted to say hello." Hello, Lewell. For you to drop by. Joy says, "I used to send the thought to my mom, call me, because I didn't want to make her run up the stairs to answer the phone." Well, that's good. Carmen says, "Hi, I'm the one who bought your rose pendant. It's absolutely lovely. Thank you." Oh, awesome. I wasn't sure if it was somebody from our, subscriber base or not, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed finding that, and I found that in one of the secondhand stores, and I just thought, what a lovely piece. Wonderful needlework and stuff in it. It was great. So I'm glad you liked it. Talon says, "I went to pick up my final pay and sign off at exit interview. The woman who did the paperwork was very uncomfortable for some reason. Tremor in her voice, very distracted, and stuttering." We'll see if there's a follow-up there. Joy says, "Then once she said, I had the feeling I should call someone but didn't know who." That was her mother. So thereafter, I sent her the message, "Call Joyce." That worked better. Yeah.
Yeah, those little things
More
really
specifics.
can. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that. Eve says, "There is a book I have that my grandmother had inherited to me, from which I learned active and passive meditation." Eve says, "Golden." Okay. I'll name it in a sec. Gotta pull out. Okay, gotta pull it out. We'll wait. But, being alive is certainly an experience. This week we've had quite a week because Tuesday night I ended up in the ER with an arrhythmia, and they were pretty good with me. I was quite happy with how they treated me, so that was nice. So I have this heart monitor thing on my chest for the next 2 weeks. Decided to wear something to cover it up so it wasn't so obvious. But they're going to see if they can figure out what kind of arrhythmia I have or if it's something else going on. And it's very exhausting when you're doing something like that. It's just like, it's weird. I mean, it was Tuesday around midnight. I didn't really get any sleep before I ended up in the ER, and I got home around 4:30 in the morning, so I didn't sleep on Wednesday. And then Wednesday night I'm trying to go to bed and go to sleep, and my brain goes like, "No, I'm sorry. Being awake is your thing now." As you've been awake for like 2 entire days. Sleep is not in your future. It took a long time to rearrange my brain so I could actually fall asleep. So that was interesting anyway. Samantha says, "What are good shields?" A variety of things, because you never know what kind of shield you might need. I have a lot of passive shields, like I'm wearing some of my bracelets today. I got some obsidian, some zoisite, which is ruby matrix.
Black tourmaline works well.
Yeah, I don't have my black tourmaline on today. This is, I think, a garnet. And then I've got some amazonite, some chalcedony, and some tiger eye. So it really depends on what you need.
Yeah, and they can all be charged up in various ways too.
Right. And then I have the shields that I use, like when I'm putting my energy out there and stuff like that, where I am imagining, I visualize that I have an energy shield around my body that lets positive energy in and rejects negative energy and sends it back to where it came from. And I've been working on taking some of my shields down that made me invisible. When I accidentally turned myself invisible, I actually did it on purpose, but I didn't realize what long-term effects it would have, I guess is what I mean. And so I think your best defense is being able to tell when somebody is infringing upon your boundaries, because you have not just physical space boundaries, which you can test pretty easily if you have a friend that you trust. You can just have them walk up to you, and you can tell pretty readily what your physical boundary is. Like at this point, it's okay. I'm comfortable with you. You an inch closer, and all of a sudden I'm feeling like, you're like crowding my space. So knowing what that is a good start, but also knowing what your psychic and spiritual boundaries happen to be. So if someone starts talking about something that makes you very uncomfortable, figuring out how you can leave the conversation or stop the conversation or divert the conversation or whatever it is that you have to do, because those things can really affect you for quite a while and make you uncomfortable. So it's all about personal space and personal boundaries. The better you know yourself, the more shielded you're naturally going to be, because you will not allow yourself to stay in a situation where you are at risk.
And magical practices and meditation will generally build up your magical shielding without you focusing on that specifically. As you just practice and work, your aura and such will become stronger.
So Jacqueline says arrhythmia is tiring because blood is not flowing properly. Oh yeah, and then I ended up with massive adrenaline rushes, and I even ended up with the shivers. Like my teeth started chattering, my whole body started chattering when the adrenaline wore off, I'm assuming, and that was fun. Although I had a good time with the nurses that were there, both the male and female nurses that were assisting me. They were pretty open and communicative and stuff like that, and I felt comfortable with them. So that was a nice change. Sometimes I'm not always comfortable with the people that are near me in that kind of a setting. So I was grateful. So yeah, it's very weird. It made my brain feel very strange. I didn't like it. So Talon says, exit interview lady also couldn't keep her eyes off my crystal Talon earrings. Everyone at work that day had to come say goodbye and tell me how things have already gotten bad. Yeah, so she's picking up on the fact that you're different and it's making her uncomfortable. Probably,
yeah.
And sometimes, like in certain situations, like when I went to the hospital, I did not wear my all my jewelry. I didn't wear my pentagram. I decided that it was better for me to leave those things at the house in case I ended up with someone of an alternative than me persuasion, which is more likely than not, and not wanting to trigger their unconscious reaction, and then make them maybe not take care of me well. I mean, in a situation like that, you want to make sure that they're all focused on the right thing. You definitely don't want them focused on, why are you wearing that kind of jewelry? But yeah. So Samantha says, I've gotten crystals, oils, and prayed, even went through shadow work to make sure some of the feelings or thoughts that I didn't like wasn't my own. Yeah. And Talon says, since I quit. Yes. Once you quit, they knew that you weren't going to be talking about them behind their back, so they were free to tell you what they really thought. I figure. But yes, it's a good idea to figure out. And when you know that they're not your own, then people can't put that onto you. It's like when people are projecting on you and they say, I think you feel this way. I know that you feel this way. And you're going like, no, I don't. I had a massage therapist do that to me all the time. where she would be working on me and she'd be going like, oh, I sense a dark energy in your heart from a horrible, terrible childhood trauma. It's like, yeah, I had childhood trauma. No, there's no dark in my heart right now. You're a projecting, girl. Go deal with your own stuff and leave me out of it. So you have to be in charge of that kind of stuff. So good. The Beezer says, my grandma showed me an old black and white photo of her standing in the woods. She said emphatically, what is that? And pointed to a shadow person walking nearby. Makes me wonder if it's in the family. Could be. They do have a tendency to follow families, from what I understand. Alex Jane says, I'm out of the shower now. My question for both of you is, what is your secret to maintaining this beautiful relationship you and Even have? What's the key to a healthy, magical, long-lasting relationship? Mutual respect.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. We just kind of fit together.
And liking one another for who we are, warts and all.
Yes.
It's like we don't expect perfection from one another, and that gives us room to grow and change and evolve and become more who we are. And we've grown together. That doesn't always happen.
That's true.
There is a risk with that but when we first met, there were so many core things that we were completely on the same page with. And then the rest of it was learning how to communicate well, figuring out one another's language.
Because everybody's words mean something a little bit different to them than, everybody's perspective on things is just enough different to make a little confusion.
And when you hear something that makes you go, what? Then you stop, and then you ask a question. Open-ended questions are the best way to find out where someone is at. Like, what do you mean by that? Or, like, what's the circumstances where this is coming from?
Being very open with each other. That's one of the major things. Being very open about everything going on, so we're not hiding things from each other. And that's
we have
the
no
major
secrets.
Part. Yeah.
Except ones that we've decided to keep before we met.
Yeah.
And we honor those too. I mean, magical oaths being what they are. And just having a genuine care for one another, who we are, how we're doing. It's not, relationships don't happen in a vacuum. It's not an automatic thing. And so whenever you're in a relationship, it's always about being in the relationship, not taking the relationship for granted, paying attention to what's going on with the other person, letting them know how you're feeling. And that's the thing, is we communicate really well with that too. So if Ian is going through an anxiety or something like that, he tells me. If I'm going through some kind of an anxiety, I tell him. We had a funny thing happen when we hit our 5th year. I had never been in a relationship longer than 5 years. And so when year 5 came around, I suddenly had all these things coming up in my head. It's like he's having an affair. It's like something's bad's going to happen. The rug's going to be pulled out from under me because I've never made it past 5 years. And it took me a while of sitting with it. And I'm going like, well, that can't happen because I know where he is 24 hours a day. He doesn't have time to do anything like that. So what the heck? And then in reviewing it and realizing where we were, I knew, okay, this is why, because this is a hurdle that I've never passed. And so I told him, I said, okay, here's what's going on. I know that nothing is happening, but this is my brain. This is my issue here. Just be extra nice to me and tell me you love me extra specially often and help me feel more secure, and then it'll be past and then we'll be good. And so it did. But if you weren't aware of that, that could have broken us up. I could have become suspicious of, I could have self-sabotaged our relationship on the spot.
Yeah, people do that a lot.
And people do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is, as far as I can tell, the
Thank
secret.
Thank you for asking, but we have a wonderful relationship and love each other very much at this point. So couldn't be happier after this many years.
And it helps that we do our magic together sometimes. But we also have our separate magic that we do as well. And, so we assist one another. What was it, last year I think it was? And I asked you, I said, do you think that I'm a good witch? Or, because I never heard him say that, that I was a good witch. And he said, what? Yes, of course. Yeah. So, always know what to ask. If you need to know the information, you need to ask. So Jacqueline says, I make an oil tincture with thistle and porcupine quills. When you feel unsafe, just rub some onto your skin. Yes, I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
I was wondering what the formula was. So porcupine quills
Thistle,
and
yeah.
thistle.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
for
that sounds like.
oil, yeah. Yep.
I like porcupines, and their quills are pretty good for that. So Eve says, okay, it's Yoga Philosophy and Meditation and Interpretation by Richard L. Hittleman. So let's see.
Okay, not familiar with that in particular, but this is the book that you.
That was the book that her grandmother, she
Yeah.
inherited from her grandmother.
Right.
Okay, cool. Brenda says, how are you feeling now? Oh, I'm feeling pretty good, although tired from all of our driving yesterday. I mean, we found a route where we didn't have to go on the major highway because we really don't like the interstate. I mean, there's so many big trucks, there's so many people trying to navigate. So I actually found a route that was just basically through the countryside. So that was awesome. But you're still having to focus and concentrate as far as that part goes. And then as far as the heart thing goes, I'm waiting to see what happens. I've had to push the button a couple of times. And I have an appointment with my doctor on Friday for her to, like, I don't know, read me the riot act. I have no clue. And then I mail this thing off on the 1st. And so I'm feeling at least that something is being done to try and figure out why I'm having these sensations, because I'm not a hypochondriac. And I hate it when I get a doctor that thinks I am. So, but if I don't know what's happening, I'm anxious, and that's what's going on. It's like something's happening, I don't know exactly what it is, and so it makes me anxious, which probably increases a bunch of other symptoms. So I'm like, I need to know what's happening, and once I have a handle on it, then I'm like, okay. It's like I want knowledge, information. So Sophia says, so what about our guides? How do I make a contact with them? Meditate, open yourself up to them, all the usual things. I mean, becoming better, a better version of you is going to automatically open up your lines of communication.
Yeah, that's basically the thing, is to try to be open to it and then try to realize when it happens, because it can be subtle sometimes. But that's would be my best recommendation, is just to be open.
The thing is that our guides are always attempting to communicate with us, and we're the ones that are blocking the communication. So working on us and clearing ourselves out will allow the communication to take place. And they get frustrated, I'm sure.
I'm sure they do.
Like, here I am hitting you over the head with a feather, and you're just not noticing it at all. But Eve says, Sophia, I would just ask and light a candle and wait for the dream state. Sophia says, is there any way to make your health through magic? Well, certainly it can help, depending on what's going on. As a healer and a Reiki master, I believe in that for sure. And,
Yes.
and sometimes crystals can help. But it also, you need to know what it is you're trying to affect. So if you're using a crystal to affect one part of your system, but that's not the thing that's causing you the problem, then it could be actually getting you more out of balance. So knowledge and information is the most important part of that before you start deciding.
And in general, just as a general thing, the better your elemental balance in your physical body, generally the better your health will be. That's usually what causes a lot of health problems, is a elemental imbalance in the physical body.
And Eve says to Sophia, yes, there is. Talk to your body before you fall asleep in the evening and ask it to talk back to your mind. If you start having dreams that are very specific about your health, pay attention to them, because that's your unconscious trying to give you some kind of information. But the more in tune you are with your own body, the better able you will be to notice things when they get out of balance. So Talon says, I found a dead kestrel earlier this year. The bird's skull lives on my altar. Wing and tail feathers are waiting for the inspiration for a spell or an art project. Cool. Eve says, heart-body connection, and you are so very welcome. Jacqueline says, healthy relationship is about working together, not against each other.
Well, that's absolutely true.
Not undermining one another's goals and health.
Yeah.
Mental, emotional, It's not about power trips. That's the other thing. It's like we have a mutual, when I say mutual respect, I mean we're a power with couple. We're not a power over, power under dynamic at all. No one's trying to like get one up on somebody else to feel like they're more important or anything.
Yeah, we don't have any agendas of that sort, so we can just be together without conflict and be in harmony.
Eve says what happens in Vegas, and Drumwitch says I'm backstage. Drumming, I'm assuming. Eve Wolf says one must be a very energetic person to be able to maintain a relationship of sorts in secret with the more than one individual. Sounds exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah, we knew somebody after we moved out here
God.
from Medford. We knew somebody who turned out had two different families.
2 wives.
Yep, 2 wives, 2 families, and was doing that old bit.
It really helped to put it a little bit into perspective for me.
Sounds impossible to do, but
it didn't work forever. But not only that, he was robbing the grants. He was the person who wrote the grants. Yeah. And then he would tell everybody that the grant didn't come through, and then he would cash the check for the grants and put it in a different account, which I guess was how he was financing his 2 families. But, when I first met her, his first wife, there was this very strange energetic dynamic between us. It was like I kept feeling she thought I was a threat of some kind. And I was like, what? Now I understand. Somehow she was picking up on his wandering ways, I'm assuming. And I was not attached at the time because Ian and I hadn't gotten together yet. And so she definitely saw me as a threat. So confirmation.
Yes, well that explains, yeah. Not just with you, but, in retrospect, she had that action she was like that with people way before you met her.
Well, right.
Yeah, it was there. Yeah. She just...
I was just the one who just really picked up on it because I'm sensitive to that kind of stuff. So Shay says, sorry I'm late, lunch hour changed. Hope you're well, Siofra, Ian and all. Hi, Shay. Talon said, just woke up an hour before the live session. Concert last night, both as a ticket holder and as a stagehand. Day started 5 a.m. yesterday, got home around 4 a.m. today. Poison was on point last night. That's a long day. So welcome. I'm so glad you made it. And Shay says, hugs back. Great to see you both yesterday. Yeah, that was fun. And Eve says, rock on, dude, to Talon. Sophia says, I ask about the health improvement for you.
She's asking if there's any way to improve your health through magic. Apparently she meant you to improve your
health. Well, I'm
health.
Using stones and things, but I have to get more information before I know what to do.
Yeah, that's part of it.
I need accurate information to make a better plan, to figure it out and know what's the best course of action. So Judy says, I haven't watched one of these in a hot minute. Hello, everyone. Or hey, everyone.
Hey, Judy.
Hi. Violet says, your healthy, loving relationship is extremely inspiring. To know it is possible is way cool. Yes.
I never thought it was possible.
I didn't either. I didn't either.
Yeah.
I certainly never experienced anything like it before. So it was a big shock. So Eve says, hey, Judy. Judy says, just went through and actually drew some today, and just anything that came to mind. Drew the man that had bothered me as a teenager and burned it, and then threw it in a gross body of water. That sounds like a good plan. Hoping it helps me in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did a lot of that kind of stuff with my uncle. I had pictures of him, and I cut the pictures out and burned pictures of him and stuff like that to eradicate him from my energy. And to sort of comfort my younger self from the abuse and stuff like that happened. Then, of course, my mother came to visit and brought his pictures back, so that was a whole different scene, which I had to deal with again, but yeah. I mean, ritual can be very helpful for healing, for that kind of emotional stuff. Definitely. I think that Asclepius is one of the Greek deities that helps with giving you information about your health through dreaming. So Judy says, thank you for agreeing. I'm anxious right now. I know, isn't it weird? Like taking your power back and trying to eliminate someone's power, energy, and influence on you makes you feel anxious, but I understand that because, you weren't allowed. it's like it's a huge step to take to taking your power back. So good for you. Willow Moon says nearly 11 p.m. here in the UK. I know, you guys. I was looking at, oh my God, all the heat that's going on over there and the drought, and then the uncovering of the stone in the river that says despair. You who see this stone, death and famine are coming. It's just like, wow. I would not want to find that rock. Alex says, you guys are so amazing. I love everything you said. I needed this today. Thank you. You're welcome, Alex.
You're very welcome.
Glad we could help. Brenda says, can you recommend a good herb reference book? Yes, Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss.
Is it still in print, do you think?
Oh, yeah, and it's
Is
actually
it?
still expensive
Okay.
because it's still pretty popular. But I consider it actually one of the best books out there because it was written before they started trying to get rid of the names of some of the herbs and so forth, and he actually had his own clinic. And they're all herbs from North America. So if you're into Chinese herbs, that's not going to work for you.
And he mostly speaks about, rather than just a compendium of knowledge, it comes more from his personal experiences with the herbs. So it's not like reading a dictionary of herbs. It's more like a
Yeah, he had a
more
client he did this
interactional.
with, like with the red clover tea. There was a guy that had stomach cancer, and it kept it at bay so long as he drank red clover tea. It kept it from getting any worse, that kind of thing. And it becomes pretty impressive. Warning about him: he was from the 1800s to the 1900s, and he is like a prude, and and that leaks into his recommendations about health. And so you have to take that with a grain of salt because, product of his times, etc., and product of his upbringing, and so forth. But the herbal knowledge is beyond compare. And, it stands up really well. That's how I saved my life, actually. I was reading that book, and, let me repeat it. Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss.
Is that Kloss?
Kloss, yeah. And when I read the book, I read it like 3 or 4 times first, and then I was looking at it and I'm thinking, what are the herbs I should have in my cupboard that I might need in case of an emergency when I don't want to have time to go to a store. And so reading the book for that, one of the things I decided I should have was plantain, not the banana looking thing, but the weed that's all over everywhere, broad and narrow leaf plantain. And it's one of the most powerful coagulants on the planet. And so I had it in my cupboard when I hemorrhaged 1 month. And I drank 3 cups, strong cups of tea as quickly as possible and stopped hemorrhaging in about 20 minutes. And I have no doubt that saved my life right there on the spot. So, there's a lot of good information in there. And weirdly enough, with plantain, it's like the doctor's physician's desk reference for herbs does not mention its ability to coagulate blood. So they see no problem with using it for anything at all. And so that's something to know. That's why I recommend the book, because then you find out some of these things that apparently have been dropped for some reason. I even went so far as to become a Wikipedia author so I could correct the information. And I haven't checked lately to see if they got rid of it or not, but, anyway. It's good to know that kind of stuff. And I've used them myself with my kids.
Yeah, well, it's helpful if somebody just has it's different if somebody has experience with the herbs rather than just, I have another herb book that I don't care for much. It's just a compendium. It's like a dictionary of herbs, and it's okay, but it doesn't have the personal experience with it, so you get a feel of how the herbs work and things.
Okay, so Woke Wizard says, hey there. Joey says, thanks. Ian says, hi, Woke Wizards. Welcome to the chat. Judy says, no problem, I feel that. And Eve Wolf says, yes, plantain. Angela says, hello, everyone. Hi, Angela. Shay says, thank you for talking about your experience with plantain. You're welcome. Angela says, did you like the coyote story, Siofra and Ian? Oh, I didn't get a chance to read it to Ian.
No, so I don't know.
I have it in my emails, and we've been so busy with these other things coming up. So I will let him know what it is. And yeah. So sorry, we should have done that. Didn't think about it with all the other stuff. Eve says, I too have a dictionary of herbs that go from my grandmother. Well, I have to pull it out to give you the name. so very useful but out of date. Yeah, sometimes that's the case. Eve says, that being said, it invites me to learn more of what has been learned recently. Because yes, they do definitely learn more things about plants as they go, if they're interested. And I know for my particular system, plants have a stronger effect on me than generally medication. And so, I do a combination of both, but I'm not against one or the other. I just know with my body, I get a more powerful effect sometimes from a simple herb than I do from anything else.
And of course, that's where a lot of medications came from. Probably
Well,
about
that was
90%
their
of
original
them.
source for a lot of
Yeah.
it. And a lot of times, if you can take the original form of it, it's not as strong as the medical
Not
form,
as harsh.
but it
usually.
also has the buffering in it that helps to minimize the side effects that you get from having the more complete or concentrated form of it. So Eve says, that being said, it invites me to learn more about what has been learned recently. Angela says, no worries, I was curious your opinion on it.
Well, I'll definitely take a look at it, and then we'll see. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize there was anything to look at.
I didn't tell you,
That's
so
okay.
you couldn't have known.
Well, we had a lot of stuff going on. We had like a 7.5 hour drive yesterday, or a 6.5 hour?
No,
Something like that.
seven and a half,
yeah.
something at least, yeah.
That's tiring.
And that makes our brains go fuzzy.
Yep.
So the Beezer says, I'm sorry I keep harping about shadow people, but what do you think they are? I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether they are like another dimension or a specific type of spirit. Some of them that I've encountered that I've grounded out have taken over the astral form of a person who died by suicide. And that happened to me twice. That when I was doing a paranormal research. So I'm trying to just keep an open mind about it and not jump to any conclusions as to exactly what they are. And that's sort of the way I like to work, because if I have too many conclusions, unless I have enough information to draw a conclusion, in which case I would be willing to share it. But that's not one I have. Willow Moon says, I was told the wild medicines which grow near your home are normally the ones you need. I think they come to find you, by the way. I love plantain. Does everything. Yeah, plantain is pretty good. Not to be taken, however, if you are on blood thinners.
But I would also add, because of your name, white willow is a natural aspirin.
Yes. And Judy says, I like that way of thinking, Willow. Eve says, I believe I realize the same, Willow. Angela says, blessings and hugs. Do any interesting workings lately? No, I don't think so. Although I had an interesting experience before all this stuff with the health started that I forgot to tell Ian, where it was like the Fae came into my room and then they had me on a carpet of moving light. It was sort of like going like this, like waves of light, and I could see it coming under me. And it was very interesting, and then I got uncomfortable. And like, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe I need to stop this. So not yet. So the Beezer says, I hear you, Siofra, thanks. Sophia says, is there any book that collect information about all or part gods and goddesses? Oh, there's tons of them. The thing is there's so many different pantheons. So if you're going to look for a compendium.
I don't know that you find one that really lists all the different ones, because they're just too many, and usually require maybe even more than one book, depending on, like Kali or something.
Yeah, I would recommend, you could look at one of those compendiums of different goddesses. You're going to get maybe a paragraph of a description of the gods and the goddesses, if they're going to go through all the different pantheons. And then from there, if you find something that is intriguing to you, then I would try to look at closer sources and more complete sources for that particular pantheon. I'm
not aware of the names of any actual compendiums of them, but I'm sure there must be some out there.
Yep. Willow Moon says, we are all alive today because our ancestors knew how to use wild medicines. It's a shame we have forgotten that knowledge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Angela says, oh wow, silly little fairies. Maybe they were trying to help. Love the Fae. Well, they were definitely trying to help. I mean, it was an interesting experience, but when they start something new like that, I can only take it for so long, and then I have to like, okay, let's put a little break on this because I may freak out if this goes any farther. But this was fun while it lasted, and then I needed to go to sleep. So Eve says, "Good to know, Siofra, learning new things every day about the plantain and blood thinners." Yeah, that's the thing that annoys me every time I see the meme that goes out that talks about what plantain is good for, and they never mention that. And I'm chronic. I'm like always typing in. It's like, you need to know this is bad. If you're on blood thinners, do not recommend this for people. You stupid people, what's wrong with you?
And just to add that, that's because plantain is an earth element condenser, and
Oh, yes.
you can make a strong fluid condenser for the earth element out of it if you're working with the earth elements.
And Ian did an experiment accidentally. So we had the plantain for the earth condenser, and he was going to paint a talisman or something with the paint. And he thought, what a good idea to add the plantain to the paint, and then I'll have it in the paint all mixed up and everything.
It was acrylic, which is water-based.
And he added it to the paint, and all of the pigment went clump instantaneously. So there was clumped pigment and water.
Yep, pretty much that's what happened.
So its ability to coagulate was very visually reinforced. And no, we cannot add that to acrylic paint for any reason whatsoever. Experiments. Judy says, just finished Fairies, a Guide to the Celtic Fair Folk. What a great intro into the Fae, by the way. Good to hear that. Eve says, oh man, I'm so glad to have learned that about the plantain. Joyce says, my library had some books on gods and goddesses. Check out your library. Well, I'm sure most libraries would have mythology books. You go the big ones like the Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology. There's going to have, every library is pretty much going to have books on those guys. And probably Hindu mythology as well. I mean, unless you're looking for a really obscure reference god or goddess.
But the Hindu deities are very handy, if you'll excuse the pun. They all have multiple arms.
Yes,
Sorry.
They are very handy.
Very handy. Yeah.
Yes. So Bep says a friend's friend was getting rid of heroin addiction on her farm, and while he was there, poppy flowers started to come out all over her house, and she never had them before that. Well, that's always interesting. Well, at least the standard California poppy is not the kind you can get heroin out of, so maybe it wanted to be friends. Say, we're not all bad. Judy says, right, Willow? It's a shame in general how much we've forgotten about our amazing ancestors. Angela says, I love reading mythology. It's so interesting. The Beezer says, laugh out loud, Ian. Angela says, ×3. I was going to say that was that pun intended.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. It happens to me occasionally.
I only do puns accidentally. So if you ever hear me do a pun, it will be by accident because I can't do them on purpose. Eve says, oh my God, I've been considering using shavings of selenite in my art. Oh yeah, well they used to use all kinds of things like that in art. I mean, they made a purple out of, or a blue out of lapis, ground lapis. The old masters used paint like that. So you're within company as far as it goes.
That reminds me too, though, that I might want to do that with my current painting. Might want to ground some selenite into a pigment.
Maybe that'll get the sparkles that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure because it's not so. It's more transparent than reflective.
Might depend on the angle of the light.
Yeah.
Too.
I'll have to play around with that.
We certainly have selenite.
Thanks for the good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Angela says, I used to think poppies only grew in Oz and we shouldn't touch them because they would really make you go to sleep. Ha ha ha. The Beezer says, Hindu deities, the original multitaskers.
Yep.
Yes. Judy says, mythology is the best. A lot of people ignore it from what I see with new witches and pagans. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly why.
It's a lot. It's, a lot of it. You have to be able to filter out the stuff that's just, debris in the middle of it, but there's a lot of real knowledge to be had there.
Well, a lot of the old stories were there to give us information about how to act in certain circumstances, like the story of Ereshkigal and Inanna is definitely an entire um, expression of how to help someone who's going through a horrific grief and how best to be there for them. And at least that's what I get out of it. But maybe other people get different things. I don't know. Willow Moon says plantain flower tops, don't eat too many. They don't look that interesting to eat to me. They are like an ugly flower. This sort of a mini stick.
And I don't know.
Fuzzy thing.
I don't know if people know this in general, but it was called white man's foot by the Native Americans because it has a tendency to grow in areas that have been walked and trampled a lot.
Yeah.
And it followed the white people came
over
them,
from
yeah.
Europe. Now it's everywhere.
Yep.
And it does grow well in trampled places. It's like it's really hard to keep a good plantain down. Although every so often we find some incredible plantain plants. We found there's one on the way down to one of our beaches where the leaves are like this big. It's the biggest.
Big broadleaf, yeah.
Yeah, the biggest plantain I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, wow, now this would be the place to go to harvest some. Instead of like the little stringy things that are on the road.
Oh, and those are usually lance leaf.
Yes, narrow leaf.
Yeah.
So Angela says, I looked up poppies recently and found out they truly are associated with both sleep and eternal sleep. Guess I wasn't so silly after all as a child. Absolutely not. And I'm sure that they knew that poppies had that reputation. Eve says, and in my gifts, like a painting and sprinkling the salad night shavings on the paint before it dries.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to experiment, find out if that could give me the effect I want for my current painting.
Judy says, ooh, I bet that selenite can make your art otherworldly. Willow Moon says, Wikipedia is quite good and there are lots of links to others just for initial research. I actually put real moonstone on my tree piece. I went crazy and bought moonstone chips and decorated the flowers for the rowan tree because I wanted to have that energy.
Yeah.
You know, the feminine energy with Rowan women coming out of Rowan.
Well, you took the whole fair, so.
Yeah, I took this fair. I'm going to take the state next. It's like, we'll see what happens. Eve says the selenite, not salad mite. Well, that's correct.
Salad mite.
that's autocorrect for you, isn't it?
Vegetarian power.
Yes.
I'm not a vegetarian, but
hey.
That's just because I went through such a long time needing blood.
Julio says, I have heard that you should only use fresh herbs in metaphysical work since you are asking for the plant to give its life to your work, but dried herbs don't have that life force in them any longer.
That is true, but it depends a lot on what you're doing, really. Dried plants are great for things like fluid condensers and things like that.
Yeah, and for medicine.
Yeah,
and so forth. When I made my poppets, I definitely was making it with fresh herbs.
That's a little bit more of a esoteric aspect to keep the spirit of the plants in the plant and use them and things like that. Yes,
having the consciousness of the plant to be involved in the working that you're doing.
It makes them more powerful for sure.
Yeah. But it's a preference.
Yeah.
I mean, these rules don't have to, they're rules, but they're not rules. It's like this works this way for certain people. But it doesn't mean that if you can't get fresh plants, you can't do powerful magic using dried herbs.
You don't want to.
Because you can connect with the plant kingdom through the ether, and have them still be there and imbue the plant material that you're using with the energy of the plant matrix, consciousness. I don't know what to call it, but anyway. Angela says, the mighty salad led us to victory, but lost the battle to the burger. I couldn't resist, sorry.
That's perfect. I like it.
Judy says, exactly. I follow Hera personally, and most seem to dislike her from mythology, but I see her side of things from how I grew up. Well, me and the peacock definitely go way back, and the peacock is one of her things. And of course, it was her firstborn, Argus, who came to visit me when I was at the workshop with Starhawk. And so I definitely have a connection to Hera via all of those things. Eve says, anytime, my fellow wise people. Angela says, Hera is one of my matrons. I find her protective, not spiteful. I actually had a coloring book as a child that featured her, and I crossed out much of the words at the bottom of the pictures in black crayon and colored her in radiant colors. Sounds
Cool.
nice. Judy says, Julia, I like to do that personally for sure. I feel like that plant is most powerful at its freshest. But it depends on what you're using it for, because some things are only good after they're dried as far as medicine is concerned.
Well, and it depends too, because fresh herbs have a lot of water in them, and if you're trying to make an oil or something out of them, you need them to be dried first or have some way to extract the water.
But even with that, like, the standard kind of thinking when it comes to making a tea out of a plant to use for medicine is you steep it, but that's not true of red clover. Red clover does not give you its benefits unless you simmer it for 20 minutes. So, it's like everything else. There's no one broad stroke that's
Right,
true
they're
all across the board. It knows know as much as you need to or can about whatever plant you're working with and what different states it's in. Like with carrots, are more nutritious when they're cooked versus raw. Weirdly enough, they have more vitamin A after they're cooked. So, yeah. Anyway. Judy says, I feel that, thank you, Angela, you're the best. And PR Rod says, hello, I'm here. I hope I'm not too late. I guess I'm late. Well, you got about 20 minutes.
That's quite the impressive emoji there, though.
Yeah. How the heck did you do that? There's a finger pointing and a face, and yeah, that's interesting. That's great. Judy says she's the boss bee too. She can help with communications and at work things. That's bee Hera. Eve says, I agree, Judy, to an extent, and also I've learned that it's a gamble to use fresh over dried for not molding purposes.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, there's that. Moldy,
which may or may not affect your working, depending.
Well, right, it depends on the herb. I think rosemary pretty much cannot mold. It's like too acidic or something, but anyway. PR Rod says, actually, it's my first time. Congratulations. Thank you for joining us. We usually start at 2 our time. So right now it's 3:11 our time, so you can get an idea of when we begin, so you can keep track of it and join us sooner next time. Julia says, well, Judy, I do like it, but it's often quite impractical if you're in the midst of winter and need an herbal cleansing bath. The same source also said to use cinnamon for something, but that it is dried. Judy says, I own peafowl because I love them, and also for Hera. Okay then. Angela says, peafowl are so sassy, I love them. One of the signs when I first began working with Hera as a baby witch was at the zoo watching a disinterested female peacock. They are pretty funny when they're not interested in the male doing all of his dancing and throwing his feathers out and spinning around and everything, and she's just like, seen it all before. Nah, nothing interesting. You're not doing it good enough for me. And it's hysterical. Anyway, Judy says that makes sense. You guys are right. I've used dried herbs too. Like I burned my dried lavender for working a while back. It was dried while still on the plant. Hell yeah, they do that too. Angela says, burn the advances of the most beautiful male peacock I'd ever seen. My brother, who isn't into mythology, said we should name them Zeus and Hera. Yeah, that's pretty cute. Because he's trying so hard and she's just being a queen and saying no. That's one of the things that's nice about the animal kingdom, different ones of them anyway, where it's like it's up to the female to decide whether that is a good enough dance or not. Is that a good enough nest? Did you decorate this well enough for me to be interested in you at all? No. Are you almost dead when you fly to the ground head first and then flip up? I don't know. You could probably get a little closer than that. Let me see what the next one does. They're so picky. But anyway, Willow Moon says, as the life leaves the plant, cut goes limp. Then it gets to a stage when it is dried, and it is transformed. The healing energy stays in the dried plant. This, as to go through, it has to transform. Judy says, my peacock legit tries so hard for his girl, just like Zeus and Hera. Julia says, love the feedback, and also consider that if you don't dry out herbs beforehand, you can't extract the concentrated herbs into either oil or alcohol. As we were saying, yes. Yeah. Not to mention incense and powders. Yep, that'd be really difficult.
Yes, but you can, ideally, you could ask the plant to leave its spirit in it when they are dried, pick them yourself, dry them that way, and that way you can have get as close to using the live plant as you can while still using a dried plant, and keep as much of the spirit of the original plant in it as you can.
So there's things you can do to
Yeah.
try and mitigate that.
Yeah.
So Eve says also, if you don't cut the roots or leaves from the veggie or fruit, it will suck out the nutrients. This is true. PR Rod says, and yes, I have question. We saw an owl in the middle of the road and it wasn't moving. Cars were passing by him and it was like he was a statue, and my husband saw it first. He pulled over to save it. Good. He must have been stunned or something. Maybe he got glanced or something and then was just stunned standing there. Judy says, yeah, plants are so difficult to take care of, y'all. It depends on if you have the greeny thumbs or not. Joy says, is having a peacock feather in your house bad luck? Nope, not mine. They're all over the place. So if they're bad luck, I'm in so much trouble, there's just really no point.
Yes, we just got given a peacock as a gift.
Not a live one, a metal one.
Metal one. Beautiful.
It's going to come in here and be under our west altar, I think, since that's where I saw the peacock in my astral temple. That'd be a good place for it.
Works for me.
Yeah. But it depends on your culture and what you decide to accept. Angela says, my favorite myth of Hera was from the coloring book. It was a child version, so parts may be glossed over, but it feels right. Hermes played a prank on her and she got upset. So he carved apologies into emeralds and brought her more and more until he was covered in them. She turned around and couldn't help laughing and helping him up when Hermes and the emeralds fell with a crash.
Yeah,
I like that. I've not heard that story.
Hermes, yeah.
But I like that story, and yes, humor can sometimes melt a heart, for sure. Judy says, just like Hermes, he's wild. The Beezer said, I was given a staff by a strong magician who has since